てやろう。我々ホワイトアルタイルの真の力を。
教えてあげよう。貴様にこの空虚は克服できん。
狩りの時間ですね。咲き誇れ。最終奥義、炎竜降臨。仕方ないね。光よ。
ゲバはないさ。これで終わりだ。
黒いバラは乱れたき、すべての幕を下ろす。
こいつらは俺が全員。
すべてが散った後は霧の時間です。
I hope you enjoyed that little intro. I'm WG and this is my attempt at helping you make a decision on which 5-star to focus on, especially if you're re-rolling or just getting a general understanding of how these 5 stars work. Important to note here as well is you are guaranteed to get 2 5 stars from the beginner banner if you play your cards right. I'll obviously make a separate video covering that topic. Just know that you'll basically be able to walk away with 2 5 stars from the tutorial. Or you could say beginner banner. But without further ado, we'll just go through the rows, so from Hugo all the way down to Veronica, and I'll be doing my best to summarize and explain to you how this character's kit works and what their end goal is, so you can decide if you do or don't like that whole shenanigan. So our first off character is Hugo. Hugo has a mechanic that is exclusive to him called Hunting Instinct. Hunting Instinct, or Hunt Commands as mentioned on the cards, is something he can build up himself that is him doing an extra attack every time an ally performs an attack. Now, what is classified as performing an attack? That is any single card played by an ally that has this attack tag. It can be anything. It could be daggers, it could be weapons, it could be bullets. Anything that has the attack tag triggers this Hunting Instinct. So Hunting Instinct is Hugo's main gimmick, and he has multiple ways of getting these. And then overall he's just going to extra attack and extra attack and extra attack. Then there's different other characters in the game that further boost extra attack damage or add specific bonuses to extra attacks, like for example the ability to break enemies faster and the like. But that's overall really what Hugo is all about. He is kind of, in a sense you could say, a bit like an assassin, in that he just waits, you have your team playing around and he's just gonna go in and attack. Also, something else that is part of Hugo's kit is the fact that he is a haste character. Haste characters have a lot of cards or actions that do not consume any action meter off of the enemy. This is a meter that would allow enemies to act before your actual turn ends, allowing you to allowing them to, for example, hit you before you've built up your shields or had the time to kill them, so he can also get around that. Outside of that, he also obviously has his own ways of increasing his own Hunt Commands damage, and then multiple ways as well as multiple epiphanies to build up more Hunt Command stacks, and then also own card draw, in that he can draw attack cards, draw his own attack cards, or even draw multiple cards. So Hugo really is all about that Hunting Instinct, extra attack lifestyle. Then the next character we have on the list is going to be Kayron. So Kayron plays around one very specific mechanic and also one very specific card. So as you can see right here, it says damage 220%, void, create 2 cards. What you're creating is this futility 1 cost status ailment with the exhaust tag. That is what is referred to as the void, and that is what Kayron plays around with. Furthermore, the exhaust tag means the moment you play this card, it gets banished. So there's 2 different states. Either you play a card and it goes into the graveyard, meaning that after your turn or whenever you've played through your whole deck, your graveyard is going to get shuffled back into your draw pile and you can draw them again. But then there's also the banished pile. The banished pile is separate, and there are cards that you won't have access to anymore, besides special interactions, but it's a separate pile from which you don't really pull anymore. And that is where, for example, this exhaust card would go. And that is also what Kayron's whole kit revolves around, and that is, for example, as you can see right here, we have a 3-cost card with huge AoE damage that reduces the cost of this card by the number of banished cards this turn. Like, for example, how many of these voids have you exhausted this turn? The more you exhaust, the cheaper this card becomes. The same is true right here in that you have the increased damage per banished card, also the ability to change voids into different cards. Like, for example, this one would add a 80% attack, 80% healing to the void card, making it for you all the more valuable playing out these cards. But then there's also nasty ones like these that make you play voids free of any cost. So that is his whole shenanigan, and the thing is, he's not the only character that has this type of like exhaust mechanic. For example, one of the starter characters that you get at the very beginning of the game, and that is Tressa, has the ability to summon multiple of these shadow daggers and advanced shadow daggers. And the trick with the shadow daggers is these also have exhaust. And any card that gets exhausted, or any card that is ethereal, which means if you don't play it, it gets exhausted and put into the banished pile, they also count for Kayron. So it's not just about him getting voids, but about you just overall banishing quite a lot of cards to make him as strong as possible, where you then also have his ultimate, which also allows you to banish all your void or futility cards in hand to increase your damage. On to the limited playtest favorite, and that is Khalipe. So important to note here for Khalipe though, and that is the 8th card you see right here, Full Salvo, has been changed away from an attack card to a more defensive card. So there might still be some changes in the way she works, but her core kit is going to stay the same. And that is, her core kit revolves around what is called in-game the Vulture launch, which is equivalent to the Vulture ejection card. So you have number 1 the Silver Whale buff, which allows you to continuously stack it, and should you get to 3 stacks, it changes the Vulture ejection card into Vulture Launch Plus. So Vulture Launch Plus is this massive card with a lot of fucking damage, and also extra damage depending on how many further Vulture launches you have in hand. So that is the whole Silver Whale mechanic. But what's even more interesting is the way this whole Vulture ejection thing works. And this is her main card. What it does is it deals AoE defense based damage and provides you with a shield. It has 3 different tags. Number 1, the tag means whenever you play a card that costs 2 or more, play this card for free. This card gets auto played for free. You don't have to pay the cost so long as you play a card that costs 2 or more. Then you have the retain tag. The retain tag allows you to keep this card on hand as long as you want. Whenever your turn ends, this card does not go into the graveyard. And then it also has the retrieve tag. The retrieve tag means that this card comes back to your hand 1 time upon getting sent to the graveyard. So what, for example, happens is you play a 2-cost card, Vulture ejection gets used, gets put into the graveyard, comes back into your hand, you can play another 2-cost card and shoot out another Vulture ejection. And that is then your AoE wave clear, your AoE damage, as well as huge tankiness gathered through these shields. Then there are multiple cards in this kit that also are further celestial, so even them being 2-cost, they can trigger each other, or you can trigger both of them at the same time from a different card. So what these, for example, do is like give you shields, so make you even more tanky. Remove enemy tenacity bar, which is the break bar below an enemy, which pretty much translates to a more vulnerable state of the enemy, as well as extra AP, so the things you need to play cards for you. And then outside of that, you also have the Greatsword Aquila, which, for example, if Vulture Launch is in your hand, move this card to your hand and reduce its cost by 1 for 1 turn. Which means whenever you have Vulture Launch in hand, you can use the Greatsword Aquila to trigger the Celestial effect on the Vulture Launch, to shoot the Vulture Launch, to get the Vulture Launch back, to get the Greatsword Aquila back. It is pretty nasty. And then outside of that, you also have the ability to deck search for high cost cards, and obviously multiple different epiphanies and the like, as well as the ability to further give celestial tags and so on and so forth. So that is Khalipe. Khalipe overall is just a AoE menace with a lot of survivability, and she might still be a really good character to go for. So that is Khalipe. Next up we have Luke. So Luke is a gunman. As you can see, he has multiple pistols, and that's what he's all about. He's all about this bullet tag right here. So the bullet tag is a classification, a card archetype, and what it does is it interacts with every single one of his abilities. So you can, for example, see how this one is called a bullet, and then you deal extra damage based on the number of bullet cards used this turn. Then you have this one, which again also deals damage based on the number of bullets used. You have this card right here, which increases the damage of the next bullet. And then also, interestingly enough, what we've learned from the character trailer for Luke is that this card changed from a 1 cost to a unusable card, which most likely hints towards this card being something along the lines of getting used at the end of your turn for free. But we have to see what they did with the deadly rounds in general. Though, what could be more important? Exactly knowing what these bullets do. So these are Luke's available bullets. You have the Magnum shot, which has, or better said, let's start from the beginning. You have the ethereal tag, meaning if you don't play this card, it goes into the banished pile. You have the exhaust card, meaning if you do play this card, it also goes into the exhaust pile. And then you have the bullet tag, as we talked about. So you have a Magnum shot, which just does damage. Then you have the silver shot, which does damage, but extra damage should you be effective against the enemy, meaning the enemy in this case would have a order weakness, which is Luke's faction. Then we have the uranium shot, which deals damage and then deals extra damage if the target has shield. And then you have the tracer rounds. So what tracer rounds do is they deal damage and then they apply a stack of mark. Mark is a debuff on the enemy, which says whenever this target gets attacked, so by any attack card, perform an extra attack with the character that applied the mark. So you use, for example, the tracer round onto an enemy, and then you shoot something like the uranium shot, and then after that uranium shot, Luke is again going to do another extra attack. Then you also have the stealth reload here, for example, which allows you to create handgun bullets. So you pay 1 AP to create 2 0 cost AP bullets. You have multiple epiphanies to increase the amount of bullets, to increase the amount of bullets gained overall, to at the start of the turn get bullets, to create 5 bullets in 1 turn. He's all about just shooting and shooting and shooting these bullets, and the good part is he's not alone. He's not the only character, and he probably also won't be the only character in the future to be released that features the bullet mechanic. Like, for example, we have I do believe it's his brother, they both have a blue and a red eye, and that's his brother Luke. And he also has this bullet mechanic with different bullets, but they overall have the bullet tag, so they also interact with it. Like, for example, here, when you exhaust bullet cards, you deal 50 times 1% extra attack damage to all enemies. So every time you use, or you don't even use a bullet, you're just gonna do 50% extra damage. You can then also increase the damage of bullet cards in general by 40%. And all these synergies are open for you to use. So if you want to play the game American style, bullets are the way to go. Next up we have Magna. So Magna is, you could say a counter beast. She is tanky, she can counter, and let's talk about 2 things you need to know, and those are the counter attack and the crystallization mechanic. So the counter attack mechanic is a mechanic that adds a stack to this character. This can stack infinitely to as many counters as you can stack, and the way this works is when you take damage, you inflict 100% defense based damage on the one that attacked you. Should you block the full damage amount with a shield, you deal 150% damage instead, and the counter attack gets reduced by 1 when that effect triggers. Now, something very interesting here is if a character attacks you multiple times, it still only costs you 1 single stack of counter. So for example, if you get hit 8 times, you're gonna counter 8 times, but it only costs you 1 single stack. So that's the counter attack. And then you also have the crystallization mechanic, which outside of neutral cards or monster cards, which are special cards you can put into any character's deck, Magna herself is the only one that currently uses the crystallization mechanic. And what it does is, crystallization is something that stays permanently throughout the duration of the fight, and it continuously gives you a certain amount of shield at the end of your turn. At a 1 stack equals a 20% shield ratio. So if you have 2 crystallization, you're always going to get an additional 40% fixed shield at the end of your turn and before the enemy actually hits you. So that is crystallization and counter attack, and that is what she's all about. So as you can see right here, every single one of her basic attack or basic cards, which are the first 3, do have the counter attack mechanic. This one comes from the potential, so don't worry if you don't see it upon launch. You just need to get a potential node on the character, and that's something you can reach day 1 at maximum day 2. So we have here for example, the crystallization on the ice fragments, and then you can, for example, get more crystallization. You could get it on your hand early, or you can at the start of the turn deal 300% damage to all enemies, which can help really well with, for example, farming. Then you have Glacial Iron Fist, which is a card that deals damage, and the more damage it deals, the bigger a shield you gain. And outside of that, then also, for example, the ability for 1 turn to have counter applied to all enemies. Now, what I've heard from other people is that this supposedly increases the counter of every single character to an AoE counter, but that is not quite true. I've played Magna extensively during the limited playtest, and during it, this counter mechanic only applies to her. It is still absolutely humongous in that she can just counter every single enemy AoE as long as she gets attacked, or as long as you get attacked at all, because your characters are a team, so you're always going to get attacked, or she is always going to get attacked when you get attacked. But then there is my favorite card in the entire game, and that is this right here, the 3rd Ascendancy for the Ice Wall. What this says is absolutely ridiculous, and it is so much packed into one, it might be one of the most valuable cards in the game. And that is what it does, is at the start of your turn you gain 2 crystallization. There is no cap, which means the moment you activate this, every single turn your shield is going to grow by 40%. Turn 1, 40% shield. Turn 5, 200% shield. Turn 10, 400% shield for free, no investment needed, and every single counter of Magna's is going to be permanently AoE, no extra necessary investment to get this. It is really one of my favorite cards, as you might be able to tell. Then you also have the ability to, for example, apply Vulnerable to all enemies. Vulnerable is a debuff that makes enemies take 50% more damage and then gets removed upon a hit. So you can, for example, like this, boost the effect of your counters or just boost the damage of your team. And that is really what she's all about, as well as also the ability to, for example, gain a shield, or when you gain a shield, you gain a counter. You can give yourself shield through multiple different ways. So Magna is a defensive counter-attacking beast with big AoE capabilities. So now that we have Magna out of the way, that brings us to Mei Lin. So before we look at Mei Lin, we once again have to understand a character exclusive mechanic, and that is the Embers. So Embers is a debuff that can be applied through different ways by Mei Lin herself, and what it does is it increases the damage taken by an enemy by 30%, either upon the hit that puts them into the break state, which is the break bar below an enemy. It's something you can interact with, you can break, and it gives you AP. And once you do that, the enemy takes 30% more damage, as well as also further taking 30% more damage getting hit during that break state. Every time you hit someone during the break state, you remove 1 stack of Ember up until you have no Embers, and then you can build them up again, deal more damage, and the like. And that already somewhat hints towards what Ember, or what Mei Lin is gonna do as a whole, and that is just punch people really hard and make sure they break. Once enemies then break, she can do even more damage to these, but overall she has some really nasty cards, so let's talk about them. First off, her ultimate is actually going to be something different in the game from what you read here. It's going to be closer to what you see in this M3. It's going to be something along the lines of, it adds an additional hit for the next basic attack card played, in that it's going to be the next 4 basic attacks played are going to hit twice So that's kind of what we're going with instead of this war 1 turn crit chance 100%, critical damage 200%. We'll obviously update this as soon as the game releases. So let's go back to what she can actually do. So we have a card that straight up is in your hand, and you just increase attack card damage by 40% period, and whenever you use an attack card, you apply a passion weakness to the target. This attack card is then talking about Mei Lin, and passion weakness is a debuff that makes an enemy weak to passion, weak to the fire element, no matter what actual weakness they have. So you're always going to get that weakness damage bonus, that weakness increased damage to the enemy's break bar, because when an enemy is weak, they also take extra break bar damage. Then you have multiple upgrades right here, like for example, whenever you use an attack card, you deal tenacity damage. Tenacity damage refers again to the break bar, which is below your enemy's health, and it is split into chunks. And then tenacity damage with a number then always takes a full chunk of that tenacity bar. Then you also have this straight up increasing your crit chance by 30%, and every time you crit you deal tenacity damage and you also gain an ember. So she scales, for example, with crit rate. You have these combo cards, which mean that when you play this card after a card, it then gets this effect. And there's multiple different versions here. You have, for example, this, which allows you to draw your 2 basic cards, so your punch and your shield, for free, reducing its cost also to 0. So you can play this card, then you can punch the enemy and you can gain yourself a shield, all for exactly a cost of nothing. You have multiple different strong epiphanies in here as well as also this card, which guarantees you attacking an enemy's weakness. You also deal extra damage, and destroy means that you break an enemy's bar, right? You break an enemy's bar, then you retain the embers, meaning this card itself, if it breaks someone, does not take an ember stack, but it still gets the ember effect. So that is what Mei Lin is all about, and the same with Luke. There's also a perfect 4-star to go alongside of her, and that is, for example, Selena. Selena is also all about that tenacity damage, that extra damage, lifestyle. She is also of the passion element, so if the enemy is weak to passion, both her and Mei Lin then deal extra damage. And she also plays around this mark mechanic, as we've talked about with Luke, and that is whenever this character then gets attacked, you get an extra attack from then Selena, and Selena can then also, when you perform an extra attack, deal tenacity damage 1. So there is a lot of synergy there, there is a lot of combinations in there, and the passion element is on launch probably the one with the most amount of characters. Right now let's talk Orlea. Orlea is the only 5-star character upon launch, and she is all about creating cards and gaining value through preserving these cards over multiple turns to increase their effect. Now, what are these creation cards? So these creation cards are these cute slimes right here. You have 3 versions. You have a softie, which increases your damage should you play it out, or just passively increases the damage of the next attack card played should you keep it in hand. The swiftie, which just continuously stacks up damage increases every single turn you keep it. And then the toughie, which either is a big shield you can play in emergencies, or passively heals you should you keep it on hand. And these softies, or these slimes, then have a mechanic. Should you have 2 of them at the same star level, they fuse together into a 2-star version. Now these 2-stars are the same shenanigan as before, just with stronger stats. You can compare them if you want to. And then we also have the 3-star versions, for which you need 2 2-stars to combine. And that's where things also get kind of ridiculous. So for example, a toughie is gonna heal you for 100% of her health every single turn. A swiftie is going to increase its own damage by 150% every single turn. And a softie is going to make the next attack card played deal 220% damage, no questions asked, or when played out, increases damage just by a flat casual 35%. So that is what she all revolves around. You then have this sacred sensor, which allows you to create 1-star cards. You have the epiphanies, which allow you to create more cards overall, more cards every turn, or specifically target certain ones, like you can target softies, swifties, or toughies, depending on what the situation calls for. Then you have the growth acceleration, which allows you to trigger the retain effect of these cards. So for example, if you put it on a toughie, you heal. If you put it on a swiftie, it gets faster damage ramp up, and if you put it on a softie, you get increased damage for your next attack cards. Then you also have these effects again, and then for example you can target specific one of those, like the ability to remove stress, the ability to trigger the retain multiple times. And then you also have this annoying card right here. This annoying card deals damage based on how many cards you have in hand, and you pull a certain amount of cards determined by your synergies and overall. And if you have a lot of retain cards in hand, they stay, then you pull new cards, and then at some point you're gonna have usually anywhere between like 8 to 10 cards on hand playing with Orlea. So this card naturally just does anywhere from 320 to 400% damage at 0 cost, because why not? Then you also have multiple of these upgrades that could, for example, deal more damage the more creations you have and the like. So overall she's all about interacting with these slimes, with these summons, and what you might have also noticed is these cost you exactly nothing to play. So she's someone you can chuck into your team that just passively makes your team stronger, doesn't really need a lot of investment, doesn't really need a lot of focus, and can still have an impact without costing you a single AP. So that was Orlea. Next up we have Renoa. Renoa is probably what you would call the main character, or like main female lead in this game due to the lore and the like. And what she does is she's all about this card right here, the Dirge Bullets. So the Dirge Bullet is a bullet which once again would interact with Luke, and it has the exhaust tag, meaning that if you play it, it goes into the discard pile. But what's special about this is it doesn't have the ethereal tag, meaning if you don't play it, it does actually go into your graveyard, and that's where this actually comes in. So this card deals 160% damage, and then after it you perform an extra attack for 80% damage. But this whole when moved to the graveyard shenanigan also works if you don't play it. So if you create a bunch of Dirge Bullets and then end your turn, you're still going to get all these extra attacks for damage, because they are getting moved to the graveyard just by you not playing them. So Dirge Bullets can also work even without you playing those. So that is the Dirge Bullets. You then have multiple ways to create these Dirge Bullets, like you can create one Dirge Bullet here, you can deal extra damage, and if you do have a Dirge Bullet in hand, you discard it, meaning you move it to the graveyard, which triggers the 80% extra attack damage, and then you also just naturally increase the damage of this card by itself. You can deal damage, and you increase the damage based on how many Dirge Bullets you have in hand. These Dirge Bullets, because they go into the graveyard rather than the banished pile, you can also draw them again, so you can have them pretty much in your deck and putting more and more and more of these Dirge Bullets into your deck. Then you have, for example, this skill right here, which allows you to discard cards, which you again could target Dirge Bullets with. So you could target Dirge Bullets to move into the graveyard to create more Dirge Bullets and then also shoot. That's kind of how she works. And then you have something along the lines of a finishing skill in the ultimate, which allows you to draw all your Dirge Bullets that you put into your graveyard, put them into your hand, and then deal 300% damage. And then you can, for example, interact with these Dirge Bullets again by either not playing them, which means massive amount of extra attacks at the end of your turn, or by, for example, playing Resolute Assault, which deals extra damage and allows you to discard all Dirge Bullets and then apply extra damage based on how many you've discarded. So that is Renoa. Then next up we have Rin. Rin is your typical enemy, sword lady with the big assets. And she does it really well. So what she has, and what's important to note about her, is this Dark Cloud stance. The Dark Cloud stance is something you can enter into with multiple of her cards, as well as also with her basic attacks, should you go for the route of increasing her potential, which really is, trust me, low investment. And what it says is that activating a Dark Cloud Blade artifact, or better said, any of her cards that mention it, you can just activate it should you be in the Dark Cloud stance. But if you use the attack card of another combatant, it doesn't really matter what kind of card it is, so long as another combatant uses this in the attack card, you leave the Dark Cloud stance. So that means you're pretty much only going to attack with Rin, but oh boy, these effects are truly worth it. So for example, you deal 120% damage, again haste tag, meaning you do not reduce enemy action count, so you can freely do as many of these without having to worry about the enemy attacking you while you're ready. And this just increases the damage by 50%. Here, all of a sudden, you just increase the damage count, so the hit amount from 1 hit to 2 hits. This one, for example, just if you have it active, all of a sudden your attack cards deal 30% more damage. This one right here actually deals damage according to the number of skill cards in hand. So if you have multiple skill cards, which you will due to playing characters around her that do not have a lot of attack cards themselves, you'll then be able to do even more damage instances, like for example up to 6 hits. And then there is multiple of these epiphanies in here that change the way the Dark Cloud stance actually interacts. Like for example, this card costs you nothing, deals 300% damage, but can only be used should you be in the Dark Cloud state. And yeah, the way you really want to play around with her is by running characters that you can pretty much get rid of the attack cards. Like for example, you have Mika. Mika has exactly 2 attack cards, so you could, for example, in your run, get rid of the water throw as a whole, so that she cannot use it anymore. And you could also try and then get rid of the whirlpool, so that you pretty much have no way to use any Mika cards whatsoever to get Rin out of her state, allowing you to perma stay in the state, trigger all these nice effects, and just have her turn the enemy into sashimi. And that is Rin. And then the last on our list is going to be Veronica. So Veronica is all about ballistas. Before we look at the ballistas as a whole, she also has a reload state. That is something that is like Embers, like Hunting Instinct, like Dark Stance, exclusive to Veronica. What it does, it increases the ballista damage by 20% per stack, and this one can be increased either through her kit or also through awakenings, which are character dupes. And then it just means that your next ballista shot is going to do extra damage, and every time you use a ballista, it then reduces the stack count by 1, but it still gets the full bonus. So example, you have 3 stacks of reload, the next ballista is going to do 60% extra damage and then reduce you to reload 2, meaning the next ballista is only going to do 40. You get the deal. So that is reload. Now, then you have a bunch of these upgrade and skill cards that all revolve around ballistas and supporting your team. And what she does is, for example, with this one, unique and outbreak of war, meaning you cannot clone it, but you also always have it in hand at the start of any fight. You just create a ballista, and these are the ballistas available. You have a 150% extra attack to a random enemy at the end of a turn. And you also have the unusable tag, meaning you won't be able to play it, but you also don't have to pay for it. So this card is just naturally going to, naturally activate at the end of your turns, and it's going to have different effects, like 150% damage, like 150% damage that hits both through through shields. Then you have 150% damage with 30% crit chance, 120% damage AoE, 60% damage to 2 random enemies, and then this micro ballista, which is one of her epiphanies. You have then the ability to pick any of the ballistas depending on which kind of situation you want it to suit on. Like for example, if you need her for AoE damage, you can get the giant ballista creation card. You need her for crit rate, you can get the enhanced ballista. You need her against shields, you can get the piercing ballista. And then all of these cards are very, very valuable for any kind of team. You gain a shield, you draw the cards of other combatants, so you can use her to search for other people's cards, while you just wait around and have her shoot her ballista. You have upgrade cards, which as a whole only need to be played once and then stay active throughout the whole fight, and you also then can't pull them again, meaning you increase the chance of pulling other cards or even other cards from combatants. You can then, for example, whenever you use another combatant uses a skill card, you gain 1 reload, which increases the damage of your ballistas. Your ballistas deal more damage, happy life. You then also have, like, for example, the ability to create these mini ballistas. You have multiple abilities, like here, you can create a second ballista, so all of a sudden you're going to do 2 different ballistas at the end of every turn. These are then also considered extra attacks, so they again also trigger with Selena, who we've further talked about. You have these upgrade cards right here, which allow you to reload, they allow you to draw, they allow you to draw whenever you reload. So that is what she's all about. She is just more in the background, kind of as like a sub DPS that just chills in the team, has a lot of tools to just support your team. provide a bit of shield, keep you alive, but then also deal big amounts of damage at the end of every turn that you don't even have to pay a single point of cost for. So these were all the 10 on launch available 5 stars outside of Haru, which is the limited character that is we are hopefully going to get more information on either tomorrow or the day after. And I hope this was able to help you make a bit more of a decision, get a bit of an idea of how all these characters work, and stay tuned for more content. Peace!